When my phone rang at midnight on that cold November evening, I knew this wasn't an ordinary call. The caller ID showed only a number I recognized from my White House days, one that belonged to someone whose very existence is classified at the highest levels. The voice on the other end belonged to someone whose name is whispered in the most secretive corridors of Washington, someone who has watched administrations rise and fall for decades. And what he told me about what Trump just did to Mamdani would shake the very foundations of everything Americans think they know about power in this country. Mr. President, the voice said, using the title I'll carry for life, you need to know what happened at Mar-a-Lago tonight. What they're calling a diplomatic meeting was actually something else entirely, something that changes everything we thought we knew about how Trump operates now. I sat up in bed, instantly alert. Michelle stirred beside me but didn't wake. In the darkness of our bedroom, with only the faint glow of DC streetlights filtering through the curtains, I listened to details that made my blood run cold. You see, most people only saw the headlines the next morning. They read about a diplomatic meeting or a routine discussion between allied nations. And the Washington Post ran a brief paragraph buried on page 6. CNN mentioned it in passing during their morning briefing. Fox News barely covered it at all. But what really happened behind those closed doors in Mar-a-Lago last Tuesday night isn't what the media reported. It isn't what Trump's team carefully leaked to friendly outlets. And it sure as hell isn't what Mamdani's people want you to believe. I've been in this game long enough to know when something doesn't add up. When a meeting that was supposed to last 30 minutes stretches to 4 hours, when security details get mysteriously reassigned, when even the most connected journalists in D.C. start asking questions they can't get answers to, you know something monumental went down. When diplomatic flights get delayed without explanation and embassy personnel start making urgent calls to their home countries at 3 in the morning, you know, the official story is just the tip of an iceberg that goes much deeper than anyone wants to admit. But here's what nobody's talking about yet. Here's what they don't want you to piece together. Here's the story that's being buried beneath layers of diplomatic protocol and national security classifications. 3 weeks ago, Mamdani wasn't just another foreign diplomat making routine rounds in Washington. This wasn't some junior official shuffling papers between embassies. Dr. Ahmed Mamdani was one of the most connected, most dangerous, most knowledgeable intelligence operatives in the Middle East. A man who had survived 3 different regime changes, who had files on American operations going back to the Clinton administration, who knew where the bodies were buried in conflicts most Americans have never even heard of. He was carrying something that could change the entire balance of power in the Middle East, documents that certain people would kill for, information that could make or break presidencies, financial records that could trace money flows through shell companies' offshore accounts, and government contracts that would make the Pentagon Papers look like a grocery list. And Trump knew exactly what those documents contained before Mamdani even stepped foot on American soil. How do I know this? Because I still have friends in places that matter. People who remember when integrity meant something in government. People who understand that some secrets are too dangerous to keep buried forever. People who watched Trump's team spend 18 months building an intelligence operation that makes anything we had in my administration look like amateur hour. Let me paint you a picture of what really happened in the days leading up to that meeting. Picture Trump's people monitoring Mamdani's movements for weeks, tracking his communications, analyzing his travel patterns, identifying everyone he met with, everywhere he went, everything he did. Picture them building a psychological profile so detailed they knew what he would say before he said it, what he would ask for before he thought to ask for it, what would break him before he even knew he was vulnerable. This wasn't the kind of surface-level opposition research that campaigns usually do. This was deep state-level intelligence gathering deployed against a foreign operative who thought he was untouchable. They knew about his family connections, his financial vulnerabilities, his personal relationships, his professional rivalries, his greatest fears, his deepest secrets. They knew about bank accounts in countries he'd never officially visited. They knew about communications with individuals he'd never officially met. They knew about operations he'd never officially participated in. By the time Mamdani walked into that meeting, Trump's team had assembled a complete psychological and operational profile that would have impressed seasoned CIA case officers. They knew exactly which buttons to push, exactly when to push them, and exactly how hard to push them to get the results they wanted. But here's what makes this truly terrifying. They didn't acquire this information through illegal surveillance or unauthorized hacking or any of the methods that would normally require congressional oversight. They got it through perfectly legal channels. Private intelligence firms, foreign partnerships, data mining companies, financial tracking services, communication intercepts shared by allied nations, social media monitoring, pattern analysis, and about a dozen other methods that exist in the gray areas between legitimate business and intelligence gathering. Let me paint you a picture of what really happened that night. Picture Mamdani walking into Mar-a-Lago, thinking he held all the cards. He had spent months carefully planning this approach. He had information that could potentially implicate high-ranking officials in 3 different administrations, including some people who are still serving in sensitive positions today. He had financial records that could trace money flows most Americans couldn't even imagine, connecting defense contracts to foreign policy decisions in ways that would destroy careers and possibly topple governments. He thought he was walking into a negotiation where he had the upper hand, where he could dictate terms, where American officials would have to listen to his demands and take them seriously. He was catastrophically wrong. Trump didn't just know what Mamdani was carrying, he had already neutralized it. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence Mamdani thought gave him leverage, Trump's people had already gotten ahead of. Not through illegal means, mind you, through something far more sophisticated and far more dangerous than that. Through a combination of technological superiority, intelligence partnerships, and psychological warfare that most people don't even know exists. You have to understand how Trump operates now. This isn't the same man who stumbled through his first term learning the ropes, making impulsive decisions based on cable news coverage and personal grievances. This isn't the Trump who relied on loyalty tests and public humiliation to maintain control. This isn't even the Trump who left office in January 2021, bitter and isolated and talking about stolen elections. And this is someone who spent years building a network that spans intelligence agencies, foreign governments, private corporations, and media empires. Someone who learned from every mistake, every defeat, every moment when he felt outmaneuvered by career politicians and deep state operatives who thought they could treat him like an amateur. Someone who has studied the sources of real power in America and figured out how to acquire them, control them, and deploy them with surgical precision. The transformation began almost immediately after he left office. While his critics assumed he would fade into irrelevance or get bogged down in legal battles, Trump was actually building something unprecedented in American politics, a private intelligence operation that rivals anything the government has ever assembled. A network of former CIA officers, ex-military intelligence specialists, retired FBI agents, private investigators, data analysts, and technology experts who are loyal to him personally rather than to any government agency or political party. He recruited people who were frustrated with bureaucratic limitations, people who believed they could accomplish more outside government than within it, people who shared his view that the permanent Washington establishment needed to be completely dismantled and rebuilt from scratch. He offered them resources, autonomy, and the chance to use their skills without the legal and political constraints that limit what official intelligence agencies can do. The result is an organization that can gather information, conduct operations, and achieve objectives that would be impossible for any government agency operating under traditional oversight. They can track targets across multiple countries, analyze financial records through shell companies and offshore accounts, monitor communications through private networks, and deploy psychological warfare techniques that would make Soviet-era KGB operatives jealous. When Mamdani walked into that meeting, he thought he was dealing with the Trump of 2017. Impulsive, unpredictable, prone to making decisions based on emotion rather than strategy, easily manipulated by flattery or intimidation, likely to make mistakes that could be exploited later. Instead, he encountered something else entirely. A chess master who had been planning this moment for months, who had anticipated every possible move Mamdani might make, who had prepared responses to scenarios Mamdani hadn't even considered. The first sign that something was off came when Trump didn't react to Mamdani's opening gambit. Usually when someone threatens to expose damaging information about American officials, there's at least some visible concern. Some attempt to negotiate, to find middle ground, to manage the potential fallout. Even experienced politicians show subtle signs of stress when confronted with potential blackmail because the implications are so serious and the potential consequences so devastating. Trump just smiled. Not his usual media smile, the one that appears in photographs and television interviews, not the political smile he uses when shaking hands with foreign leaders or domestic opponents. This was something colder, more calculating, more dangerous, something that told Mamdani he had walked into a trap that was already closing around him, a situation where every move he thought he could make had already been anticipated and countered. What happened next is where things get really interesting, and where most Americans would be shocked to learn what their government is actually capable of when the usual rules don't apply. Because Trump didn't just neutralize Mamdani's leverage, he didn't simply defend against the attack, he flipped the entire situation, turning what should have been Mamdani's moment of triumph into the beginning of his complete destruction. By the end of that 4-hour meeting, Mamdani wasn't threatening to expose American secrets anymore. He was begging Trump not to expose his, but the transformation didn't happen all at once. It was a gradual dismantling of everything Mamdani thought he knew about himself, his mission, and his position in the global intelligence community. The meeting began in Trump's private study, a room most visitors to Mar-a-Lago never see. The walls are lined with artifacts from his presidency, but also with more recent additions. Maps of global operations, photographs of meetings that never appeared in any official records, documents that shouldn't exist outside of classified facilities. Mamdani noticed these details immediately, and his confidence began to waver before anyone said a word. Trump started by demonstrating exactly how much he already knew about Mamdani's operation, not just the broad outlines, but specific details that should have been impossible for any outsider to acquire. He mentioned conversations Mamdani had in supposedly secure locations. He referenced financial transactions that went through encrypted channels. He cited communications with individuals who operated under deep cover identities. Then Trump began displaying documents that Mamdani thought were unique, information he believed gave him exclusive leverage over American officials. Except Trump's copies were more complete than Mamdani's originals. They included context, background information, and cross-references that revealed connections Mamdani had never discovered. What Mamdani thought were smoking guns turned out to be small pieces of much larger puzzles that Trump's people had already solved. But the real psychological warfare began when Trump started revealing information about Mamdani himself, personal details that went far beyond anything that should have been available through official channels, family connections that Mamdani thought were secret, financial arrangements he believed were completely hidden, romantic relationships that could destroy his standing in his conservative home country, operational failures that he had covered up for years. Trump didn't just have information, he had leverage, real devastating career-ending leverage that could be deployed at any moment through channels that Mamdani could never trace back to this meeting. And Trump made it clear that he was perfectly willing to use every bit of it if Mamdani didn't cooperate completely. How did Trump pull this off? It comes down to something most people don't understand about modern power dynamics. Information isn't just about what you know. It's about what you can prove, when you can prove it, who will believe you when you do, and most importantly, what you can do with that information once you have it. Mamdani had information? Sure. Damaging information about American operations that could embarrass officials and damage relationships. But Trump had something more valuable. He had credibility with the people who matter, the ability to shape narratives through media outlets that could spin any story in any direction, relationships with intelligence agencies that could verify or discredit any piece of evidence, and most crucially, the willingness to destroy anyone who crossed him without any concern for diplomatic consequences or international relations. More importantly, Trump had been building a case against Mamdani for over a year. Not the kind of case that gets filed in criminal court, but the kind that gets whispered in boardrooms and embassy back channels and intelligence briefings. The kind that can destroy a career, a reputation, a family legacy without a single formal charge ever being filed, without any official investigation ever being announced, without any public accusation ever being made. The beauty of Trump's approach is that it's almost completely immune to traditional countermeasures. Mamdani couldn't appeal to diplomatic protocols because no official accusations were being made. He couldn't complain to his government because admitting Trump had compromising information would require explaining how he had gotten into such a vulnerable position. He couldn't go to the media because Trump controlled the narrative through his own network of friendly outlets and surrogates. By the time that meeting ended, Mamdani understood something that most of Trump's opponents never figure out until it's too late. Trump doesn't just win battles, he controls the battlefield. He decides when fights happen, where they happen, what weapons get used, who gets to participate, and most importantly, what victory looks like when the dust settles. But here's what makes this story truly significant for every American. This wasn't just about one foreign diplomat getting outmaneuvered. This was a demonstration of something much bigger, a preview of how Trump plans to handle international relations in his next term, a glimpse into a strategy that could reshape America's position in the world. The old model of diplomacy relied on mutual respect, shared interests, careful negotiation. Trump's new model is based on total information dominance. Know everything about everyone who matters. Be prepared to use that knowledge when necessary. Make sure every potential opponent understands the cost of crossing you. Some people will call this authoritarian. Others will call it brilliant. I call it dangerous. Not because it won't work, but because it might work too well. When you can manipulate anyone, anytime, using information they thought was secure, the temptation to abuse that power becomes almost irresistible. The meeting with Mamdani was just the beginning. Trump's team has similar files on dozens of foreign officials, opposition politicians, media figures, and business leaders. They've spent years building an intelligence network that rivals anything the CIA ever put together, and they're planning to use it. What happened to Mamdani wasn't an isolated incident, it was a warning shot. A message to anyone thinking about challenging Trump's agenda once he's back in office. Cross us and we'll bury you. Try to expose our secrets and we'll expose yours. Attempt to undermine our administration and you'll discover just how much damage we can do to your life, your career, your family's future. The scary part is how legal most of this is. When you have enough money, enough connections, enough resources, you can gather information on almost anyone without breaking a single law. Private investigators, data mining companies, foreign intelligence services, disgruntled employees, financial records, communication intercepts, social media monitoring. There are 1,000 ways to learn someone's deepest secrets without ever crossing the line into illegal surveillance. Trump's people have mastered all of them. What they did to Mamdani was essentially a blueprint for how they plan to handle anyone who gets in their way, identify their vulnerabilities, gather evidence of their mistakes, build a case that doesn't need a courtroom to destroy their credibility, then deploy that information strategically, precisely, devastatingly. Most Americans have no idea this is happening because most Americans still think politics works the way it did 20 years ago. They think it's about policy debates and campaign promises and media coverage. They don't realize that modern political warfare happens in shadows, using weapons most people don't even know exist. The Mamdani meeting changed everything because it proved Trump's new system works. A foreign official who thought he could leverage American secrets got completely neutralized in a single evening. Not through military force or economic pressure or diplomatic negotiations, through pure information warfare. And if Trump can do it to Mamdani, he can do it to anyone. Think about what this means for his domestic opponents. Every Democratic leader who's planning to challenge him in 2028, every journalist who's investigating his business dealings, every federal prosecutor who might be building a case against him, every intelligence official who might leak unfavorable information about his administration. They're all potential targets for the same treatment Mamdani received. The same thorough background investigations, the same comprehensive intelligence gathering, the same carefully planned information warfare campaigns. The most chilling part is how efficient the whole operation was. 4 hours to completely flip an international crisis into a personal victory. 4 hours to turn a potential enemy into a reluctant ally. 4 hours to send a message that will echo through diplomatic circles for years to come. But let me tell you exactly what happened during those 4 hours because the details matter. They tell us everything about how power really works now and what anyone who challenges this system can expect to face. The meeting began at 8 p.m. sharp. Mamdani arrived with a small security detail and what he thought was an airtight plan. He had rehearsed his presentation dozens of times, anticipating every possible Trump response, preparing for every conceivable counterargument. He had backup plans for his backup plans. He thought he was walking into the most important negotiation of his career with every possible advantage. Trump was waiting in his private study, alone, except for a single aide who operated the recording equipment. No lawyers, no State Department officials, no intelligence briefers, just Trump sitting behind a desk covered with documents that Mamdani would soon discover contained everything he thought was secret. The first hour was almost anticlimactic. Mamdani made his presentation, laying out his evidence, explaining his demands, making his threats. Trump listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding, sometimes making notes on a legal pad. He seemed almost bored, like someone going through the motions of a routine business meeting. Then Trump began to speak. And that's when Mamdani's world started to fall apart. Trump started by correcting errors in Mamdani's presentation, small things at first. Dates that were wrong by a few days, financial figures that were slightly inaccurate, names that were misspelled, details that seemed insignificant but demonstrated that Trump knew more about Mamdani's own operation than Mamdani did. Then Trump began displaying documents that Mamdani had never seen before, photographs of meetings Mamdani thought were secret, transcripts of conversations he believed were secure, financial records from accounts he was certain were invisible to American intelligence, communication intercepts from channels he thought were encrypted beyond any possibility of foreign penetration. The psychological impact was devastating. Everything Mamdani thought gave him leverage, Trump already knew about. Everything Mamdani thought was secret, Trump could expose at will. Everything Mamdani believed made him dangerous to American officials, Trump could neutralize with a phone call. But the real destruction began when Trump shifted from defense to offense, when he stopped showing what he knew about Mamdani's mission and started revealing what he knew about Mamdani himself. Personal financial arrangements that could destroy his standing with his government, romantic relationships that would be scandalous in his conservative culture, family connections that would embarrass his children and endanger his relatives, professional mistakes that would end his career, personal secrets that would ruin his reputation forever. And Trump didn't just have information, he had proof. Photographs, documents, recordings, financial records, witness statements, evidence that would be credible to anyone who saw it, evidence that could be distributed through channels that would maximize damage while protecting Trump from any retaliation. By the third hour, Mamdani was no longer trying to leverage his information against American officials. He was trying to figure out how to protect himself from complete personal and professional destruction. He was bargaining for his survival, not his mission's success. And Trump was just getting started. Mamdani walked out of Mar-a-Lago looking like a man who had seen his own funeral. Pale, shaken, defeated, his security detail noticed he didn't speak during the entire ride back to his hotel, didn't make any phone calls, didn't send any messages, just stared out the window like someone processing the complete collapse of everything he thought he understood about power. The next morning, his entire negotiating position had changed. Instead of threatening to expose American secrets, he was offering cooperation on intelligence sharing. Instead of demanding concessions from the U.S. government, he was volunteering information about his own country's intelligence operations. Instead of playing hardball, he was practically begging for mercy. What could Trump have shown him that created such a dramatic reversal? What kind of evidence could be so damaging that an experienced diplomat would abandon his entire mission rather than risk having it made public? The answer tells us everything we need to know about how politics will work in Trump's next administration, and it should terrify anyone who cares about accountability, transparency, or the basic democratic principle that no one should be above the law. Because if Trump can neutralize foreign diplomats this easily, what do you think he can do to domestic opponents who don't have the protection of diplomatic immunity? What happens when he turns this same information warfare machine against American citizens who challenge his agenda? We're about to find out, and most Americans have no idea what's coming. The Mamdani incident was just the first move in a much larger game. A game where Trump has been collecting pieces for years, positioning them strategically, waiting for the right moment to demonstrate just how much power he's accumulated. That moment has arrived, and the rules of American politics will never be the same. Everything you think you know about how government works, how politicians interact, how international relations function, it's all about to change. The old guardrails are gone. The old norms don't apply. The old assumptions about what's possible, what's legal, what's acceptable, they're all out the window. What happened to Mamdani is what happens to anyone who underestimates the new Trump operation. Complete, total, devastating defeat. Not through superior arguments or better policies or more effective governance, through pure information dominance and the willingness to use it without mercy. This is the future of American politics, and most Americans don't even know it's already here. The meeting ended with Mamdani signing documents that effectively made him an intelligence asset for Trump's organization. Not legally binding, but morally and professionally devastating if he ever tried to back out. He walked in as a foreign diplomat representing his country's interests. He walked out as someone who could never again operate independently without wondering if Trump's people were watching, listening, recording. This is what total victory looks like in modern politics. Not defeating your opponent, but owning them. Not winning an argument, but removing your opponent's ability to make arguments. Not proving you're right, but making it impossible for anyone to prove you're wrong. Trump has perfected this system, and he's about to deploy it on a scale that will reshape everything. The question isn't whether he'll succeed. The question is whether American democracy can survive the process. What happened to Mamdani is just the beginning. Every politician, every journalist, every activist who thinks they can challenge Trump without consequences is about to learn what Mamdani learned that night in Mar-a-Lago. You can't fight an enemy who knows all your secrets. You can't negotiate with someone who holds your reputation hostage. You can't win against an opponent who's already decided the outcome before you even know the game has started. This is the new reality, and most Americans have no idea it's already too late to stop it. The transformation is complete. The old Trump who made impulsive decisions and relied on loyalty and intimidation has evolved into something far more dangerous. Someone who understands that real power comes from information and real victory comes from making your enemies destroy themselves. Mamdani discovered this too late. The question is whether the rest of us will figure it out in time to do anything about it. But based on what I saw in that intelligence report, based on what my sources are telling me about what's planned for the next 4 years, I'm starting to doubt whether anything can stop what's coming. The game has changed. The players have changed. The rules have changed. And most Americans are still playing by the old rule book while Trump is already winning by rules they don't even know exist yet. The morning after that meeting, I made some calls of my own, reached out to people who still talk to me, people who know how these things really work, people who understand what we're actually dealing with here. What I learned kept me awake for the next 3 nights. Trump's operation isn't just focused on foreign targets like Mamdani. They've been building files on everyone who matters in American politics: Democratic leaders, Republican rivals, journalists, prosecutors, judges, intelligence officials, military officers, business executives, labor leaders, activists, academics, anyone who could potentially challenge Trump's agenda or expose his operations. The scope is breathtaking. We're talking about thousands of detailed psychological and operational profiles, updated constantly, cross-referenced with family members and professional associates, maintained by an intelligence operation that operates completely outside traditional government oversight. They have information that could destroy careers, end marriages, bankrupt businesses, trigger criminal investigations, expose personal secrets that people would do anything to keep hidden, and they've demonstrated their willingness to use it without mercy against anyone who crosses them. What happened to Mamdani is what happens to anyone who underestimates this system. Complete, total, overwhelming defeat. Not through superior arguments or better policies or democratic processes, through raw information warfare deployed by people who understand that knowledge is power and that power unconstrained by ethical limitations is almost impossible to resist. This is why I'm telling this story. Not because I think it will change anything, but because people need to understand what they're really facing. The old rules are gone. The old protections don't exist. The old assumptions about what's possible in American politics no longer apply. Every Democrat who's planning to run for president in 2028 needs to understand that Trump already knows things about them that could end their candidacy before it begins. Every journalist investigating Trump's business dealings needs to understand that their own financial records, personal relationships, and professional communications are probably already being analyzed by people who specialize in finding leverage points. Every prosecutor building cases against Trump associates needs to understand that their own backgrounds are being scrutinized for anything that could be used to discredit them or distract from their work. Every intelligence official considering leaking unfavorable information about Trump's plans needs to understand that their identity probably isn't as protected as they think it is. The message Mamdani received that night in Mar-a-Lago is the same message everyone else needs to hear. Trump's people know more about you than you think they do. They're prepared to use that information in ways you haven't imagined, and there's no traditional political process that can protect you if they decide you're a threat. This isn't about Republican versus Democrat anymore. This isn't about conservative versus liberal ideology. This is about whether American democracy can survive the emergence of a private intelligence operation that's loyal to one man and accountable to no institution. What happened to Mamdani proves the system works. An experienced foreign operative got completely neutralized in a single evening. If someone with his resources, his experience, his government backing can be destroyed so easily, what chance do domestic opponents have? The game has changed, the players have changed, the rules have changed, and most Americans have no idea that they're living in a completely different country than the one they grew up in. The phone call that woke me up that night in November was just the beginning. Since then, I've learned about similar operations targeting other foreign officials, opposition politicians, inconvenient journalists, and anyone else who might interfere with Trump's plans for his next administration. Each operation follows the same pattern: comprehensive intelligence gathering, psychological profiling, identification of vulnerabilities, careful preparation of leverage points, and then surgical deployment of information designed to achieve specific objectives with minimal exposure for Trump's organization. It's efficient, it's effective, it's mostly legal, and it's completely changing how power works in America. The question that keeps me awake isn't whether Trump will use this system to crush his opponents. He's already doing that. The question is whether anyone will figure out how to stop him before it's too late. Because once this kind of information warfare becomes normalized, once political opponents start destroying each other through personal secrets rather than policy debates, once the very idea of privacy disappears for anyone who participates in public life, we're not living in a democracy anymore. We're living in something else entirely. Something that uses democratic language and maintains democratic institutions but operates according to rules that would be familiar to anyone who studied how authoritarian systems actually maintain power. Mamdani learned this lesson the hard way. The rest of us still have time to figure out what we're going to do about it. But that time is running out faster than most people realize. And the phone calls I'm getting suggest that what happened to Mamdani was just the opening move in a much larger game that most Americans don't even know they're playing yet.